Episode 2, Part 2, Owning the Channel, Tools, Trust, and the Move to Make Monday Morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important that we recognize as humans by nature, we want to be heard and we want to be acknowledged. We do not want to be overlooked. We do not want to be ignored. And when you look at that from a lens of a community as a whole, when we as an agency in a public safety position, which is incredibly influential, everything you put out is immediately newsworthy, right? When we look at that and we hold that with the immense gravity that it really is, that we have this much influence and people are counting on us to say, hey, we have responded to XYZ location. We don't know anything else right now. We've secured the area and everyone is safe. Check back on our app for more information. We'll get you updated as soon as we know more. Something like you've said nothing, but you've acknowledged everything and
Yeah.
you've included them as part of the community that deserves and is entitled to know what's happening in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I think you talk about relationships, not even with your direct leader or your team around you, but the relationship with the community too. You know what? They told me when something was happening. I'm going to go ahead and submit that tip anonymously. I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I did see it. It's years down the road that maybe those things come to fruition, but man, when they do, right? It put in the work because it's powerful. It all comes down to communication at the right time, even if you know so little, right?
It really does. And I think one thing that we have to remember as communicators and also as leaders is that sometimes we get hyped up with, hey, let's do this fun thing, let's do this, social media trend, let's do this, let's do this. And it's great to humanize our public safety responders. But I think we always have to remember one thing. At some point, your leader, yourself as a PIO, someone from your agency is going to be a narrator of trauma. And that's really important. So we can't clown around so much that when the bad thing happens, people won't take us seriously. Oh, all they've been doing is showing, videos of ducks. We have to be the purveyors of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it's that balance of the communicator and leadership to make sure that we're conveying that information. Yes, we're conveying the great information about the super job that our employees are doing, but we're also going to address when an employee has done the wrong thing. That shows leadership. And so when the bad thing actually happens, people will take us seriously. That's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Great perspective on that. And I think one of the biggest takeaways in the conversation is that trust is a deliverable, right?
100%.
Trust is a deliverable in every angle and every lens that you're looking at between you and your community, between you and your team around you, between you and your executive leadership. You have to lean on each other and know that the other is going to be there, right? And the days of say nothing until we know everything are over. The no
Completely.
is not an option. So when we look at trusted communication and what that looks like today, when an agency controls its own direct narrative and that line to the community, and that doesn't mean that we're changing the story. To your point earlier, it means that we are there first. We are at the table saying this happened and we want to tell you about it because we respect you as our community and we want to make sure you're safe and you have the information you need right now. What does that start to do when you reach that level, when you're pursuing this relationship as an executive communicator? What does that do to not only your internal agency, but your community? What do you start to see shifting there, Judy, from your perspective?
Well, I think you'll be shocked, and I know in some agencies I've worked with, they were shocked. All of a sudden, your clearance rates go up, and you're like, "What?" Because all of a sudden, people are trusting you and they're providing information. So that's a huge deliverable for leaders, right? If communication can help, push your clearance rates up, does help solve crimes. Oh hell, we're in for that. Also, you'll find that once the media start understanding that the community actually is impressed by what you do and likes what you are doing as an agency, it's a lot harder for media to throw stones. because then people get a little angry, right? So if people like the agency, that makes a big difference in the way you're going to have traditional media coverage. The other thing is, what's really interesting, there was a study in Canada a number of years ago that said that if people knew their agency, so they knew who the chief was, they were aware through social media, through an app, through whatever, or they knew officers, when something bad happened somewhere else, it didn't affect that agency. So when you have a Minneapolis or a Baton Rouge or a Baltimore happen where there's malfeasance by officers, they're not, everyone isn't painted by the same brush. They go, well, that might have happened in Minneapolis. That would never happen in our city because I know the chief. I know the agency. That is huge. And lastly, the other big outcome that every chief wants is money, resources. So if you have a community that supports you because they feel like you care about them and that you're providing that information, when it comes to budget time, I need 12 more officers. I need new cars. I need new Barco loungers for the firehouse. I have to put that dig in. You're going to get the money. But if people don't like you, you're going to have your elected officials say, no, I'm sorry, you don't have the support of our community. So those are the outcomes that are really important for leadership and that we need to be focusing on from a communications perspective.
Communication can be transformative, right? I mean, if it's done right and it's done strategically and it's done intentionally with the outcome in mind before you ever hit send the first time, before you ever even publish anything, it can truly be transformative. And I do want to pull, I would be remiss not to pull the thread a little bit here, Judy, in reference to a mobile app as a tool. And I want to highlight that, not from my role with the sherifapp.com or our brands, but primarily as a public information officer. When I was in Stark County, I saw the before, the during, and the after. Before, we had a tool that was so direct, a tool that cut through the noise. And this is before AI really went wild, right? I saw the before of trying to get through, and even as a past journalist, sometimes having to call the paper and say, hey, that's not exactly how that quote was said. Can we tell it like it was said? And respectfully adjusting, that was a big workload sometimes to go through and clean some things up. And getting on social media and then watching all these comments and seeing the misinformation, even on our own posts sometimes, where the information was there. And how are you getting this on these comments? Are you looking at the same posts that we published? But when we introduced the mobile app, and I use the word transformative all the time because, I mean, it went straight. We had to promote it. We had to let people know that they could trust it. There was work behind getting to the success that we saw. But when we got there, I didn't stand on the phone for 10, 15 minutes, after I submitted something to make sure it went out right. I didn't have to go through and clean up a bunch of comments. We actually reached a point where folks would, if there was any misinformation that we would typically battle, well, did you see their app? Here's a screenshot of what actually happened. And you talk about just feeling like the aha moment, right? But pulling that thread a little bit on how powerful that truly is. I love your perspective of, I wasn't really a supporter before, but I am now. Tell me a little bit more about that change.
It was all about people not knowing who to trust anymore. It used to be, and I'm really old. I remember the Walter Cronkite days, right? There was that news anchor that you trusted. You might have really trusted a certain reporter, at your radio station or whatever. But that's all gone, right? Traditional news media is long gone. And people just don't know who to trust online, especially with the plethora of the fake news sites now. We have a lot of foreign actors, especially foreign governments, that create these news sites. Then they create a bunch of bots and trolls and sock puppets to make it look like they have 5 million followers when none of them are real. But what happens is, a web troll news site will create a story, and what they tend to do is scrape real news stories from across the country. They'll pick one happening in a small community, and I have a client that's working through this right now, and then they'll blow up that story with a bunch of disinformation. And what happens is algorithmically, it will get into the feeds of people locally, and they'll go, oh, wait a minute, here's a news outlet that's reporting on that story. They go into the story and they're like, oh, wow, there's like, 800,000 people that are really upset about this. I wasn't upset about it because I thought the police department did the right thing. But now I look, 800,000 people are mad, and I want the chief to be fired, when none of it is true. So with that is our landscape and our environment right now. People are looking for that trusted source. And it was really interesting. Ed Flynn, who is my chief in Milwaukee, was always so far ahead of the curve. And we were having problems just with local media reporting the truth. And there was personality conflicts and everything else there. But what was really interesting is he spearheaded, along with our PIO there, Annie Schwartz, something called The Source. And this was long before apps. And it's like, we're going to create the source. It's not part of our website, but the source will have all that information that today we would put on an app. And we were driving people to the source. And this is where we were making our corrections. This is where we were, dispelling rumors. This is where we were putting out our FAQs. But now there's the one spot to do it in the app. So my change of heart came fairly quickly when AI really started creating a lot of these news sites, and people's trust began to be eroded with their regular places that they used to go for information. Even at the birth of Twitter, if you remember, Twitter was being used as the absolute de facto place to go when you were dealing with an emergency. People will go to Twitter. Well, that obviously has morphed, and now that it's X, not so much of a trusted platform anymore. So people are looking for that. But I think the important thing with the app is that we have to be able to, again, report on the good, the bad, and the ugly. We want people to go to that site to be the source of information. And they have to know, people in the community have to know that you will call out when you're in the wrong. And I think that's really important. And that's how you build trust. And there's great research about the fact that in a crisis, people will trust the person or the organization that they know that cares. And we can convey that very quickly through the app as well. And the one thing that is a question for me, and maybe you can answer this, with AI, because people aren't using Google anymore, no one's doing searches, they're just going to Claude or Grok or Perplexity or ChatGPT. When you put information on an app, will it be scraped by AI? Because I know AI initially goes to the web, and then it sometimes will look at social media, but mostly not. So we right now tell people you still need to have a website with FAQ pages, with rumor control pages. Tell me about that from the app side.
Yeah. So one of the things, as with any, I think, public safety agency, when you're adopting a new tool, IT's in the room. IT's in the room. What does this look like from a security standpoint? And that was some of the first questions that we tackled. Well, what does this look like if it's on an agency phone or device? What does this look like if we are looking at scraping mechanisms? Are folks going to be able to grab this information, et cetera? And what is wonderful about the external apps in particular is that they are external. They live in their own space. They live in their own silo. You are in complete control over what is on that tool and how it goes out, when it goes out. You can retract if you need to. You can edit if you need to. It's not, you can stop visibility on certain things. And I use that as an example because following a high profile incident was not one press release and done. It was, here's the first step. Here's the second step. Here's the third step. And what was wonderful is that during that high profile moment or series of moments, we could show them those different phases on the app, and they could follow. If they were catching it at press release 1 or 2 or 3, they could get caught up. But also, just as importantly, we could remove it when it was done, because you need the ability to say, okay, this is now over. We need now to move on to this. And so it was to where it was the best of both worlds. Everyone could access it when they downloaded the app. But there were still these barriers and protections in place where you weren't being scraped and information being used elsewhere or being used by AI and things along those lines. It really was the best of both worlds. It is the best of both worlds. For now, we're serving more than 1,000 sheriffs nationwide in particular, and hundreds of others from EMA agencies, police, fire, you name it. And I think more and more folks are realizing that this truly is the package. It protects you from AI, but we can incorporate that as we continue to grow and advance where it makes sense and where all security measures have been considered and acknowledged, right, and addressed. So to answer your question, it is not it's a wonderful tool for so many different reasons. And no, they can't scrape it. And so that's pretty powerful. So, yeah, I mean, Judy, I honestly feel like we could continue to talk we're going to have you back, I think is the moral of the story. I feel like there are still so many things I want to just dive into with you. And, one of the things though, I will say as we lean towards wrapping up here, one thing that we really try to bring to this platform when we're sharing this with the public safety professionals across the country is that hard takeaway. We've talked about so much, we've unpacked so much, we've given theory, we've given reason and intention and all of those things, but from two different lenses here, Judy, I'd love for you to give us that final punchline of, if I am a communicator inside a public safety agency and I'm trying to get into that room to have more influence, what is my next step? And the same for the executive leader who has a communicator that they need to be turning to more often. What is their next step? And that's all we can do is take the next step and continue to move forward.
Yeah. The next step for any communicator trying to get in that room is to develop trust with their leadership. Period. End of story. That's what it is. The talent that a communicator should be bringing to that job, I call it intelligence times 3. You bring your education, your knowledge, your experience. You bring what's going on internally in your agency, because you should know what's going on, what people are saying, because people are going to tell you something before they tell the chief executive. And you bring the intelligence from everything that you follow outside, all of the social media, all the traditional news media, what is happening, not only in your community, but what is happening in your profession around. So what's happening in law enforcement? What has a department done that's different? So you bring that intelligence times 3. So you have to build the trust. On the leadership side, the very first thing is you need to hire the right person. You have to make sure that you're hiring someone that you trust enough that they can tell the emperor when they're not wearing any clothes. And if you're watching this and you don't understand the parable I'm talking about here, go online, Hans Christian Andersen, The Emperor's New Clothes. Someone needs to be able to tell you as a leader that your baby's ugly, and you need to be fully invested in trust in that person's advice to you. As much as you trust legal, you have to be able to trust your communicator. If you don't have that person in your room right now, you need to go find that right person. So really, trust is the basis, is the foundation on both sides.
It is the deliverable, right? Right. We hit that earlier for sure. Well, Judy, before we do wrap, I definitely want to take a moment just to give you space to talk about briefly 10-8 communication, the executive communicator, this lens that we've been looking through during this discussion today is a course that you offer. And so where can folks find 10-8 communication? Give us an idea of what type of services that you do provide to folks.
Yeah, very quickly, 108communication.com. That's pretty easy to find it. But what we do is twofold. We'll do consulting work with agencies, especially if they're in crisis. Crisis communication seems to be the big thing. And then we also go in, we do training. We do PIO training, but most of my focus is on the executives, because I have found that there's great PIO training out there, but if the bosses don't know what their PIOs are learning and why they need to communicate. Well, PIOs can't do their jobs because the bosses don't understand. So the executive communicator really focuses on leadership, how to communicate inside your agency. So communicating through your agency down, communicating up to bosses. So almost everyone, maybe with the exception of sheriffs, have bosses that they have to communicate with, communicating across different agencies. So if you have to deal with the ATF or the FBI or US Marshal Service or your fire service or your public works, how to do that, and then also how to communicate outside. So I call it meta communication. So that's kind of what the focus of that is. And we also do a lot of work with internal communication, change communication. 70% of change fails because of bad communication, and also just like general crisis communication. So it's all there. But you mentioned the guide on the DOJ, the COPS office. If you go on the COPS office, you can download that guide, and that's essentially me and three of my very smartest friends downloading their brains into a guide for law enforcement or public safety executives about how to hire the right PIO, what communications plans look like, what crisis plans look like, how to do interviews. It's all in there for folks.
Yes, and we of course will share the links. Of course, will be below so that folks can click and get to those very easily. But Judy, again, a phenomenal conversation. You just hit several topics that I think I'm going to be sending you a new invite here in the near future. That we need to have a conversation about those things as well. But what a pleasure just to sit down and talk with you and learn from you and have a conversation. Again, the fact that you came from journalism over into public safety, near and dear to my heart. Lots more conversations to happen because of that alone, I think. But yes, thank you so much. And again, those links are below, so definitely check those out. And whether you're the chief, the PIO, the one person shop covering it all, because we know you're out there as well, remember that your community is already listening. They're waiting for you to say something. The question is whether you will be the one talking. So, Judy Powell, thank you so much. This, of course, has been On the Record, the Public Safety Brief. And I'm Michaela Thomas. We will see you again next time.